The day Eric came back from his business trip, I was lying in a hospital bed, having just undergone a D&C. My phone buzzed. After 2 weeks to cool down, do you know what you did wrong? The same condescending tone. The same quiet arrogance. I glanced at the 4 still taped to the back of my hand and typed back, I do. He must have been in a good mood. He even added a playful emoji, something he rarely used. Why is no one home? Anna, where are you? Without hesitation, I sent him 2 photos. The first was the ultrasound report from a month ago confirming the pregnancy. The second was today's surgical discharge form. Chapter 1. A month before Eric left for that trip, I happened to be near the office and decided, on impulse, to stop by and see him. That was when I saw him with Chloe, his former classmate, leaning in close, their heads almost touching. Eric's arms were wrapped around her, boxing her in between himself and his desk in what looked unmistakably like an embrace. They were both focused on something on the computer screen. Eric was animated, speaking with energy. Chloe listened intently. I leaned against the doorway of his office. I watched his jaw move as he talked, the angle of his chin brushing lightly over the top of her head. I watched his long fingers settle over the back of her hand, guiding it as they moved the mouse together. It wasn't until a passing assistant gasped, Anna, that the 2 of them noticed me. Chloe jerked her head up and accidentally bumped into Eric's chin. The collision only pushed them closer for a split second. I shot the assistant a look. She flushed and hurried away. By the time I looked back, Eric and Chloe had already separated. Chloe's face was flushed, her expression guilty and flustered. Eric, on the other hand, looked completely at ease. What brings you here? He asked lightly, walking over and taking my bag from my hand as if nothing had happened. When he turned and saw Chloe still standing there awkwardly by his desk, he frowned slightly and lowered his voice. You should get back to your desk. Have legal double-check the penalty clauses in that contract. The young woman bit her lip and nodded. As she passed me, she suddenly stopped, as though gathering every ounce of courage she had. Anna, please don't misunderstand. I arched a brow and listened with deliberate interest. Eric and I, it's not what you're thinking. We were just reviewing a contract together. When she finished, she looked up at me. Then, almost reflexively, she glanced at Eric. I had to suppress a smile. There was something almost impressive about a girl barely in her 20s, the way even her affected innocence had its own fragile charm. Unfortunately for her, she was standing in front of a 30-year-old Anna who had long since learned not to be rattled. I didn't respond to her. Instead, I tilted my chin slightly toward Eric. I don't want to see her in the company again. The color drained from Chloe's face instantly. She turned to Eric with a pleading look. Eric narrowed his eyes, confusion flickering across his expression. Anna, it's not what you think, he said. I curved my lips into a faint smile. If it's not what I think, then maybe her professional competence is the issue. Since when does a routine contract require the CEO's personal, hands-on guidance? His expression faltered. He opened his mouth as if to argue again. I let the smile fade and looked at him calmly. Are you really going to stand here and debate with me over whether a junior assistant stays or goes? We held each other's gaze for a few seconds. Finally, he gave a small shrug. Fine. Your call. Chapter 2. Chloe ran out of the office with tears brimming in her eyes. Eric sighed softly and closed the door behind her. Then he stepped up behind me and wrapped his arms around my waist, pressing his forehead into the curve of my neck, rubbing lightly. Anna, you're jealous. His voice was low and husky, and there was something almost amused beneath it. I was wrong. I got too absorbed in work and didn't watch my boundaries. You know, Chloe and I studied under the same advisor. He asked me to look out for her. His breath was warm against my skin. For a split second, the image of them pressed so close together flashed through my mind again. A wave of nausea rose unexpectedly in my throat. I slipped out of his arms and turned to face him. Then I reached up and smoothed the faint crease in his collar. I said lightly, I don't mind you looking out for someone you know. But there are plenty of graduates from top schools working here. If every one of them needs your personal mentorship, we might as well shut down operations. This isn't college. If one person doesn't follow boundaries, it isn't fair to everyone else. I kept my tone measured. I could have said worse. Eric's gaze darkened slightly. He slid his arms back around my waist. You're right, he said softly. I didn't think it through. Chloe's temperament probably isn't the best fit for the company. Don't worry. I'll handle it. Next time you come by, you won't see her. When he said that, the tension inside me loosened, just a little. Eric and I had known each other for 10 years. Married for 4. We'd gone from college sweethearts to that enviable startup power couple people like to talk about. We had clawed our way through too many hard years together to end up where we were now, successful, stable, respected. In private, we aligned on everything that mattered. Same values. Same rhythm. A foundation that felt unshakable. We were each other's closest confidants. In business, we trusted each other completely. He handled product and engineering. I handled management and operations. Staffing decisions had always been my responsibility. This year, while trying to focus on my health and preparing for pregnancy, I stepped back from daily operations. I handed management over to Megan, the one person I had personally trained and trusted most. The last time Megan and I spoke on the phone, after finishing her routine update, she hesitated. Almost casually, she mentioned that a newly hired intern, an assistant, had been restless. Megan never spoke without purpose. And it was only an intern. She could have made the call to keep or let go herself. Unless she couldn't. If it wasn't me standing in the way, then it had to be Eric. I kept my voice neutral. What's her name? Chloe. Chapter 3. The name wasn't unfamiliar. Earlier that year, our alma mater had invited Eric back to speak at an anniversary event as one of their distinguished alumni. I went with him. The lecture went smoothly. The auditorium was packed, the atmosphere electric. 10 years had passed since we graduated. The boy who once looked all sharp angles and academic intensity had grown into someone confident and composed. He carried himself with ease now, measured, self-assured, charismatic. I remember feeling proud. Proud of him. Proud of us. In every movement, he carried himself with effortless composure. I felt a genuine surge of admiration and pride. Those had been our best 10 years. When the Can-Day began, most of the questions revolved around our startup journey and career advice for graduating seniors. Chloe was the last to raise her hand. She looked delicate and sweet, the kind of girl who inspired instant goodwill just by standing there. Under the gaze of the entire auditorium, she tilted her face up toward the stage, appearing shy. But her question was anything but. Eric, do you have a girlfriend? The room burst into laughter. No matter the setting, personal questions always stirred the most curiosity. I laughed too. I didn't think much of it. Eric remained composed. Thank you for your concern, he replied politely. I'm married. Across the crowd, our eyes met. I shot him a teasing smile. He looked back at me with mild resignation. I assumed that would be the end of it. But instead of sitting down, Chloe lifted the microphone again. Then would you mind having another girlfriend? The laughter died instantly. The room fell silent. Eric's brow tightened. I looked at her, puzzled. Students who made it into top universities usually had enough social awareness not to cross obvious lines, no matter how outgoing they were. Just as the atmosphere grew unbearably awkward, she smiled lightly. I'm kidding, Eric. I'm Chloe, a computer science major. I hope I'll have the opportunity to apply to your company after graduation. Eric wasn't about to make promises. But in front of a full auditorium, he didn't embarrass her either. You're welcome to submit your resume after you graduate. After the event ended, Eric and I walked hand in hand across campus. Everywhere we passed, he pointed out places tied to our early days, small, vivid memories from when we were young and in love. His memory had always been sharp. Details I had long since forgotten, he recalled effortlessly. He sighed softly and said, Anna, thank you for choosing me back when I was nobody. You stayed with me through 10 years of struggle. More than the company, you're the most valuable thing in my life. Every decade from here on out, we stay together. No matter what. Eric had never been particularly good with romantic words. Which was why, whenever he spoke like that, I listened carefully. Just as we were about to leave, someone came running after us. Eric, wait. It was the same girl from the Can-Day. Chloe. She stopped in front of us, slightly out of breath. A sheen of sweat glistened across her pale forehead, and a natural flush colored her cheeks, making her look almost painfully fresh-faced. A flicker of irritation rose inside me. There's a line in life, cross it too often and it stops being charming. That rule applies to anyone over 18. Eric's expression cooled as well. He didn't greet her. He simply looked at her. Under our silence, Chloe visibly tensed. Her fingers twisted together in front of her chest. She glanced at me, hesitant. Hi, are you Eric's wife? I just wanted to apologize. I was out of line during the talk. I hope you don't mind. Before I could respond, Eric cut in, a trace of impatience in his voice. Apology accepted. Is there anything else? My wife and I are heading out. He took my hand and began to turn away. I won't deny it, his reaction pleased me. No woman enjoys watching someone openly covet her husband. The faint cloud over my mood dissolved almost instantly. But just as we started to leave, Chloe's voice rang out behind us. I really envy you, Anna. You're so lucky to have someone as amazing as Eric. I stopped. Heat flared in my chest. I turned slowly, fixing her with a cold stare. Chloe, right? Being young isn't an excuse for being foolish. If your goal after graduation is to land a good husband, then 4 years at a top university clearly didn't teach you much. Put your energy where it belongs. Be decent. Work hard. If you focus on becoming capable, you'll build a future worth having. She stood there, stunned. I didn't spare her another glance. I turned and tightened my grip on Eric's hand. He was smiling at me, amusement dancing in his eyes. Come on, sweetheart. After that, I pushed the whole incident out of my mind. It seemed trivial. I never expected that 6 months later, that name would surface in my life again. Chapter 4. Megan told me that the day after I showed up at the office, Chloe submitted her resignation. Whatever unease I had been holding on to dissolved. I threw myself fully into preparing for pregnancy. Eric and I were both in our 30s now. For years, we had been stretched thin, late nights at the office, endless client dinners, non-stop travel. Both our families had been urging us to have a child for a long time. Eric always shielded me from the pressure. When his mother pressed too hard, he even claimed he had health issues just to buy us space. At a recent gathering with friends, almost everyone we knew had children. Tiny, rosy-cheeked babies passed from arm to arm. Eric couldn't stop smiling, holding one after another, clearly enchanted. That night, back home, when the lights were off and we were wrapped around each other, I saw something different in his eyes, an unusual brightness in the dark. Let's have a baby, he whispered. Maybe a daughter. Someone smart and beautiful like you. I didn't refuse. Our careers mattered, yes. But building a life with someone you loved, sharing a child, that was a kind of happiness you couldn't replicate. Preparing for pregnancy, in truth, mostly meant slowing down. Letting go. Resting. One evening, I had dinner plans with a few friends. I texted Eric to see if he wanted to join. He replied that he had a business engagement that night. I didn't question it. With me stepping back from the company, the workload on his shoulders had grown heavier. As I was heading out, I suddenly remembered the private reception house we used for corporate events, the one in the hills. The last of the wine we'd stored there was probably gone. Eric never paid attention to those details. He likely hadn't noticed. Worried he might not have time to prepare that night, I had the driver load 2 cases of good wine into the trunk and take me to the reception house first. When we arrived, the place was unexpectedly lively. People were arranging flowers and balloons in the entrance hall. We had leased this property for 5 years. It was strictly used for corporate hospitality, client meetings, private dinners, executive receptions. I stayed seated in the car for a moment, running through our recent client list in my head. I couldn't think of a single event that would require this kind of setup. I hadn't planned to get out. But curiosity got the better of me. I stepped into the lavishly decorated foyer. The staff who had been setting up froze when they saw me. Their hands stopped mid-motion. Their eyes darted nervously toward the interior. The unease in my chest sharpened. Just as I reached for the door, I heard a familiar, bright voice from inside. Eric, thank you. You're so good to me. This is going to be the most unforgettable birthday of my life. My hand went rigid on the handle. A chill spread through me, crawling up my spine and into my limbs. For a second, I couldn't bring myself to push the door open. Then I heard his voice. Calm. Steady. I'm glad you're happy. 4 simple words. They struck like a crack of thunder, shattering whatever fragile hope I still clung to. What was Eric doing here with Chloe? And why was Chloe here at all? One of the staff outside opened their mouth, as if to warn them. I shot them a sharp look. No one said a word. The conversation inside continued. Eric, you're spending my birthday with me tonight, won't Anna be upset? He gave a low chuckle. It's just a birthday. It's not a big deal. A small, delighted squeal followed. Honestly, working here suits me better. There's none of the politics from the office. And it avoids misunderstandings with Anna. And I get to see you more often. Her voice softened on the last sentence, filled with anticipation. The implication needed no explanation. I stood at the door for a moment, waiting. Eric didn't respond to her last comment. A few seconds later, I heard footsteps approaching. I'll head back to the office first. I'll come back later. The gift on the table is for you. A reward for all your hard work lately. In a little while The door swung open. I lifted my eyes and met Eric's stunned expression. He froze. The smile on his face hadn't fully faded. His mouth remained slightly open, the rest of his sentence swallowed whole. Eric? In a little while what? Chloe hurried up behind him and peeked out from over his shoulder. Within seconds, the color drained from her face too. Chapter 5. Anna. Eric swallowed before speaking, testing the sound of my name. My hands hung at my sides. I pressed my nails into my palms until the sting brought me back into my body. Looking at the two of them standing there, his figure partially shielding hers, what was left to misunderstand? So this was how it had been done. All the careful detours. All the hidden arrangements. I would never have imagined that the man I trusted most, the partner I had built a life and a company with, the man who once told me I was the most precious thing in his world, could wear two faces. And it wasn't as if there had been no warning signs. I had always prided myself on being perceptive, sharp. How had I been foolish enough to believe everything he said? Time is a terrifying thing. It convinces you that if you've known someone long enough, you must know them completely. That length equals depth. That history guarantees trust. Perhaps my expression was too cold. Eric frowned and reached for my hand. I brushed him off. I tried to move past him into the room. He didn't step aside. He stood there like a wall between me and Chloe. The girl who had been peeking out a second ago retreated behind him, shrinking into his shadow. I lifted my chin and forced a smile, one edged with mockery. But my eyes burned, as if something gritty had blown into them. We were only inches apart. So close. And yet I couldn't see him clearly anymore. Anna, let's go home first. I'll give you a proper explanation. Eric's arm tightened around my waist, trying to steer me toward the door. Something inside me snapped. My hand trembled as I swung it across his face. The crack of it echoed through the hall, sharp enough to make the staff turn their heads. His face jerked to the side. He pressed his lips together but didn't flare up. Instead, he turned back slowly and brushed his thumb beneath my eye, as if wiping away tears that hadn't fallen yet. The softness in his gaze looked just like it used to. Anna, let's just go home. He was trying to soothe me. I tilted my chin up and stared at him without blinking. What was he worried about right now? That I'd make a scene and damage the company's reputation? Or that I might lash out and hurt the girl hiding behind him? For the first time in years, my certainty faltered. Then Chloe slipped out from behind him. Her small frame moved in front of him as if to shield him. How can you hit him, Anna? She burst out. You didn't want me at the company, I resigned like you asked. There's nothing between Eric and me. How can you slap him without even asking what happened? He's the CEO. You can't just humiliate him like this in public. Being this controlling and... Enough. Eric grabbed her arm and pulled her back. You don't get to speak to her like that. Apologize. The room buzzed in my ears. Chloe's voice. Eric's voice. For a split second, it felt less like they were denying anything and more like they were a couple arguing, while I stood there as the intruder. How ridiculous. In that moment, everything I believed about marriage, about love, collapsed in on itself. I shook off Eric's hand. Numb, I walked into the reception house I had once designed myself. I hadn't been there in months. It barely resembled the place I remembered. The original pieces I had sourced, paintings I'd painstakingly acquired from an Italian artist, were shoved into a corner. In their place hung cheap, trendy decor that looked like it belonged in a lifestyle blog, not a corporate reception space. At the bar, the row of sleek white porcelain cups I had selected for formal client meetings was now mixed with brightly colored cartoon plates. Even the cool-tone throw pillows on the lounge sofas had been replaced with warm, cutesy plush cushions. I stopped just inside the entrance and took it all in. A hollow laugh escaped my throat. So Chloe had treated this place like her own living room. Anything tacky, anything sentimental, she brought it in without hesitation. And Eric had allowed it. He knew exactly how much time and effort I had poured into designing this space. Every piece had been chosen carefully, tailored to our industry clients' tastes. Then my eyes landed on a side table. A boxed La Prairie skincare set sat there. The gift. I felt as though someone had pressed a hot iron against my chest. Eric knew that brand. Back in the early days of the company, we had gone together to buy a gift for a female partner. When he saw the price tag, just over $4,000, he clicked his tongue in disbelief. Then he leaned close to my ear and whispered, half joking, half sincere, "One day, when we're successful, I'll buy this for you." When we finally did make money, I never waited for him to remember that promise. He was too busy. He'd long forgotten. So I bought it for myself. I never imagined that his once earnest promise would end up fulfilled, just not for me. The chatter outside eventually faded. Eric stepped inside and grabbed my wrist. "Let's go home." I was too soft. My old professor kept asking me to look out for her. I didn't want to upset you, so I compromised and placed her here. I looked at him steadily. "So your professor asked you to throw her a birthday party too? Your professor told you to spend tens of thousands on skincare? Your professor suggested you lie to me about a business dinner? Is that right, Eric? Do I look stupid to you? Or is Chloe some kind of mistress you're raising on your professor's behalf?" The barrage of questions left him speechless. His lips parted. Closed. Opened again. No explanation came. Disappointment seeped through me despite my resolve. For a fleeting, irrational moment, I wished he would just say it. "Yes, all of this is fake." But he said nothing. His silence was an answer in itself. An acknowledgement that every unreasonable thing I had just listed, he had done of his own will. I closed my eyes. Chapter 6. "Anna, how can you say that?" Chloe's voice cut through the room. "Eric threw me a birthday party and bought me a gift because I've been doing well here. That's all. If it bothers you so much, I'll give it back. Everyone says you care about your employees, Anna. I'm starting to wonder if that's true." Her face was flushed with indignation. She hurried forward and held the La Prairie box out toward me. Her chin lifted stubbornly, eyes red and shining. "Take it back. Stop making things difficult for me and Eric. Sometimes I wonder if I've grown old. Because I truly could not understand the mind of a 20-something standing in front of me. She had good looks. A solid education. And yet she was clinging, deliberately, to a married man more than 10 years older than her. All sweetness and adoration when she faced Eric. Barely concealed hostility when she faced me. Perhaps stealing fruit tastes sweeter than growing your own tree. Perhaps taking something from someone else feels more thrilling than building something from scratch. Unfortunately for her, I was never the kind of woman who swallowed humiliation quietly. And I was certainly not the kind who stood behind Eric, sacrificing in silence. I reached out and flipped open the lid of the box she was holding. Surprise flickered across her face. Then confusion. Then fear. The sleek blue glass bottles inside caught the light for a brief second. Before I tipped the entire box over. The bottles shattered against the marble floor. Thick serum and cream spilled across broken glass in a sticky mess. I wiped my hands with a tissue and tossed it onto her. "You like picking up trash? There you go. No one at home ever teach you how to behave once you step into the real world? Whatever is happening between my husband and me, when did you earn the right to comment on it?" I stepped closer and caught her chin between my fingers, forcing her to look at me. "Chloe, I gave you a chance. If you insist on acting cheap, then don't expect to be treated like anything else." Maybe my words had cut deeper than I intended. Tears spilled down her face, humiliated and raw. "Enough, Anna. She's just a kid." Eric stepped forward and pulled us apart. His expression darkened. "Anna, that was too far. There's nothing between Chloe and me. She just graduated. She's naive. Maybe a little overly friendly, but she doesn't have bad intentions. I know what happened before left you with a bad impression, but you can't convict us based on your imagination. Imagination? I let out a short, incredulous laugh. Then I walked slowly to the bar. I picked up one of the mismatched cups that didn't belong there and tossed it onto the marble floor. It shattered instantly. In the sharp crack of porcelain breaking, Eric's frown deepened. His eyes tracked every movement I made, as if trying to decipher what I would do next. I brushed my hands together and called the driver inside. I pointed at the original paintings shoved into the corner. Take those back. Everything else, smash it. The driver stared at me, wide-eyed. He glanced at Eric instinctively. Don't look at him, I said coolly. Break it all. If someone else has touched it, I don't want it. Chapter 7. On the drive home, Eric insisted on getting into my car. I glanced at him, my tone laced with irony. What happened? Birthday over already? His brow remained tightly furrowed. Stop, Anna. I was wrong. I shouldn't have handled it that way. I shouldn't have lied. But I promise you, Chloe and I haven't crossed that line. That line. I didn't want to define it. A sickening weight lodged itself somewhere between my throat and my stomach. The car fell into a heavy silence. Eric let out a quiet breath. Anna, you know what kind of man I am. Look around at our circle, how many people lose themselves, compromise, play both sides. I haven't. My feelings for you haven't changed. Everyone gets tired sometimes. Chloe is just a distraction. A way to decompress. She's naive. Simple. There's no calculation there. I cut him off, swallowing the nausea rising in my throat. If you're truly innocent, then you must see how obvious her intentions are. He shrugged. It's just how young girls are. Anna, you're the only one who truly cares about me as a person. Whatever I've spent on her doesn't even amount to pocket change. It's not worth getting upset over. His honesty made my skin go cold. Once, Eric's greatest strength had been his sincerity. His steadiness. Now, in his tailored suit, calm and polished, he spoke lightly about the harmlessness of wealthy men amusing themselves with younger women. The arrogance. The quiet entitlement. It was all there. And I realized, with a jolt, that somewhere in the years of boardrooms and negotiations, Eric had become someone I didn't recognize. His face hadn't changed much. But his mind, his values, had shifted beyond my reach. Chloe might have been foolish. Unlucky. Too obvious. That was why I caught on so quickly. But before Chloe? How many other young women had decompressed to him? If he could deceive me in love, what about the company? When he encouraged me to step back, to focus on pregnancy. Was that devotion? Or the first move in quietly removing me from control? I didn't dare follow the thought too far. Fear descended like a storm front, heavy and suffocating. It didn't lift. Chapter 8. The next morning, after Eric left for work, I opened my closet and changed out of my soft loungewear. I gathered the prenatal vitamins and supplements I'd been taking and placed them neatly in a bag. I handed them to the housekeeper and told her to throw them away. She looked at me, hesitant, as if she wanted to say something. I didn't explain. Don't mention this to him. She was someone I had personally hired years ago. She understood boundaries. She knew what to say, and what not to. At the cafe downstairs from the office, Megan was already waiting when I arrived. When she saw me in a tailored suit instead of casual clothes, her eyes widened slightly. Boss, you're. I gave a small nod. You're right. I'm coming back. The relief on her face was immediate. That's great. I didn't want to disturb your recovery, and I wasn't sure how to bring certain things up. I kept wondering if I was overthinking it and didn't want to disappoint you. But now that you're back, this is really good. A quiet alarm went off inside me. Megan, trust your instincts. And trust my judgment. She nodded. Eric's been planning an acquisition. She studied my expression carefully as she spoke. An acquisition? Eric hadn't mentioned a word. And we had only just stabilized the company's growth in the past few years. We weren't structured for aggressive expansion yet. It was too soon. I felt my expression tighten and gestured for her to continue. There's a company called Novatech. Eric's very interested. He says they've developed a proprietary AI algorithm that's ahead of the curve. The due diligence report shows strong financials. Public data looks spotless. She hesitated. But that's exactly the problem. The numbers are too perfect. I can't shake the feeling something's off. She pulled a document from her bag and slid it across the table. I suppressed the shock building in my chest and read carefully. By the time I finished, a cold wave rolled through me. Megan wasn't being paranoid. Anyone who had actually run a company knew that no financial report was flawless. This one looked engineered to impress outsiders, not operators. Megan continued, lowering her voice. Eric seems to be in a hurry. He's already instructed departments to coordinate with legal and move the acquisition forward this week. The last time I went into his office to drop something off, he wasn't there. There were 2 acquisition agreements on his desk. She looked uncomfortable. I glanced at them. Her voice dropped even further. He's already signed. My head snapped up. The shock hit clean and sharp. Right now, the company's equity structure was simple. There were only 2 shareholders, Eric and me. In the early days of our startup, he had insisted I hold 51%. Control and decision-making power would be mine. He trusted me, he said. He would focus on technology, product development, and expanding projects. Maybe back then, even he hadn't expected that we would catch the wave of the tech boom and scale as quickly as we did. My fingers tightened around the report. My heart sank all the way down. So this was it. He resented my control. If he wanted a greater role in management, he could have discussed it with me openly. Instead, he chose this, an acquisition designed to hollow out the company and everything we had built over the years. Ironically, I had already been drafting a plan to restructure equity. The proposal just wasn't finalized yet, so I hadn't brought it up. Had he really grown that impatient? And then I remembered. A few weeks ago, he had asked me to sign a broad authorization document. He'd said that with me away from daily operations, urgent procedural matters needed faster handling. At the time, I hadn't questioned it. I had even felt sorry for him, thinking he was carrying too much alone. I had always considered myself sharp, decisive. And yet the man sleeping beside me had maneuvered me into blindness. The pain cut deep. But this wasn't the moment to collapse. Chapter 9. Next Tuesday, Eric would personally lead the team to negotiate in Tongzhou. If everything went smoothly, they might sign the acquisition agreement on the spot. Megan asked if we should step in immediately and halt the process. I considered it carefully. Then I shook my head. That would be too easy on him. And tearing things open right now would cost me as much as it hurt him. If I moved, I would move in a way that left him no room to recover. Over the next few days, after Eric left for work each morning, I left shortly after. Quiet meetings. Quiet calls. Quiet preparations. The night before his trip, he packed his suitcase, humming softly, clearly in a good mood. I walked over and wrapped my arms around his waist. Since the incident with Chloe, I had kept my distance. I hadn't even had a proper conversation with him. He knew he was in the wrong, and around me he had been careful, subdued. Now, feeling me reach for him first, he stiffened slightly, then held me back with unusual force. My cheek rested against his chest. My voice was muffled when I spoke. Can you not go tomorrow? I asked softly. Let's go to the hospital together instead. He went still. Then he eased me back just enough to look down at me. His gaze darkened slightly, studying my face. After a beat, his expression smoothed over. Not this time, he said gently. There's an important project kickoff. I need to be there in person. I'll give Megan a couple days off so she can take you to the hospital. Don't rush the pregnancy thing. We've got time. I lifted my chin and held his eyes. As if I could look past the practiced tenderness and see what lay beneath. Is there something you're hiding from me? His pupils shifted, just slightly. A flicker of something passed through his eyes. I pretended not to notice. I can let the Chloe thing go, I continued softly. But if there's anything else you're lying about, I won't forgive you. People who betray someone's sincerity pay for it. His shoulders visibly relaxed. He must have assumed I was still tangled in jealousy over Chloe. That I needed reassurance. That I was asking for promises to soothe my insecurity. I swear, he said. There's nothing else. Anna, we have a long, good life ahead of us. You have to trust me. Over the years, we had both become frighteningly skilled at keeping our composure. Even in each other's arms, we could no longer measure how much of the other was real. The next morning, I walked him to the door. He leaned in and kissed my forehead. I didn't move away. I stood there, watching his confident stride as he walked down the path, smaller and smaller in the distance. After the car carrying him pulled away, I called Megan. Find a way, I told her, to let Chloe know about Eric's travel schedule. The clubhouse was gone. Eric, cautious of me, had distanced himself from her. But a girl who had just tasted something sweet rarely gave up quietly. Then I headed to the office. My first stop was the CFO. He sat across from me, visibly uneasy, his eyes drifting toward his phone every few seconds. If you're thinking about warning Eric, I said calmly, you can leave right now and pack your things. Whatever he's promised you is meaningless. Until this acquisition is finalized, I still hold 51%. Removing you would take minutes. And since I'm sitting here today, at this exact moment, do you really believe I'm unaware of what you've been doing? I leaned forward slightly. Do you think Eric's trip will go as smoothly as he expects? I suggest you think carefully. Protect your reputation. Chapter 10. That Tuesday, I stood calmly in front of the floor-to-ceiling windows of my office, looking down at the city below. I was waiting. The first call came right on time. Megan. Boss, just like you predicted, Chloe showed up. Our negotiation meeting at the Intercontinental had barely started when she barged in. Her voice was lowered, controlled. She was dressed like she was heading to a date, not a boardroom. Eric's face went dark immediately. He told her to get out. When she realized he was serious, she grabbed his jacket and started crying. Everyone watched the whole thing. Someone even took photos. The other company's executives clearly started questioning our professionalism. The way they looked at Eric, there was a shift. To be honest, I wasn't interested in Chloe anymore. She was simply a lever. If Eric enjoyed the innocence of young women so much, he could also learn to endure their impulsiveness. He had invited the trouble. He could sit in it. It wasn't until Megan told me both sides had signed the acquisition agreement that I finally relaxed and closed my phone. Not long after, the second call came. The moment I answered, Eric's voice burst through, angry, tight. Anna, what are you doing? Why are all the company accounts frozen? I have an urgent payment to make today for a major partnership. The first installment has to go out immediately. He must have realized he'd lost control of his tone. He steadied himself. Anna, whatever issues we have, we can resolve them privately. There's no need to drag the company into this. This company is the result of everything we've built together. Whatever you're feeling, set it aside for now. I pulled the phone slightly away from my ear and replied evenly. So you still remember this company is ours? Then why were you trying to swap it out from under me? I didn't soften it. I went straight to the point. Silence followed. Long enough that I wondered if he'd hung up. Finally, his voice returned. Anna, I actually think the way things are right now is good for us. You handle the home. I handle the outside. You've had your years in the arena. You've accomplished enough. It's time to step back and return to life. Honestly, I don't want a power couple dynamic anymore. I want a warm home when I come back from work. You. A child. Look at our friends. Isn't that how it always ends up? There's no need for both of us to exhaust ourselves chasing ambition. Even though something in me had already gone cold toward him, he still had the ability to make me hesitate. Back when the startup was at its hardest, when every decision could have meant survival or collapse, he never once told me to step back and rest. When he was buried in code and development, I wasn't giving any less. Loans. Credit lines. Compliance filings. Licenses. Operational pivots. Emergency fixes to keep the business breathing. I could say this without hesitation, every step this company took was soaked in my time, my energy, my life. My voice came out rough when I challenged him. If you're so desperate for a warm home life and you're always talking about how heavy the pressure is, why does the person who steps back have to be me? Don't dress it up as, for my own good, when what you're really doing is trying to take what I built. He gave a quiet laugh. Even without seeing his face, I could picture the expression, controlled, amused, faintly contemptuous. Anna, after all these years, you still don't understand something. His tone stayed smooth. What you do has value to a company, but it's limited. In other words, anyone can do it. But the core product, the thing that actually makes this company worth anything, my team and I built step by step. I'm not willing to let your management philosophy sit above my product. Anna, the acquisition agreement has been signed. Now you have two choices: tell finance to wire the money, or wait for the company to be sued. Then, as if he were being generous, he added calmly, "Sweetheart, this is business. Personally, I really don't want you working yourself to exhaustion." My grip tightened around the phone. Whatever softness I had left was gone. "Eric," I said evenly, "do you remember what I told you before you left? People who betray someone's sincerity pay for it." I hung up. Then I called my attorney. And after that, I drove to the hospital. While I waited for the procedure, I rested both hands over my abdomen. I never imagined my marriage to Eric would end with a small life leaving my body. A child we had once wanted, both of us, so badly. And yet it had chosen the worst possible moment to arrive. I still remembered the afternoon I'd received the pregnancy confirmation. I'd been holding back my excitement, choosing my words, preparing to tell Eric. When Megan's call came first. She said, "The new intern assistant has been getting bold. She's called Chloe." And just like that, life's Pandora's box cracked open. Dramatic. Inevitable. Step by step, it left me nowhere to hide, not even from myself. Chapter 11. After I sent Eric the pregnancy report and the surgical paperwork, he didn't reply. Instead, he booked the first flight back that night. He stopped just outside my hospital room door. When he stepped inside, his eyes were red, shock, disbelief, anger all tangled together. We locked eyes. His voice broke as he forced the words out. "Anna, you killed our child. You're unbelievably cruel." I lifted my chin. My expression stayed calm. "Not as cruel as you." He took a step closer. "Do you know how many things I could have handled openly? But I chose to deal with them quietly because I didn't want you hurt. Why do you always have to dig? Why do you have to pull every thread until everything unravels? Would it really be so terrible to just be a full-time wife? Isn't my love enough?" I swear, it was the most absurd thing I had heard all year. I laughed. And as I laughed, tears spilled down my face. If you had asked me that once years ago, I might have thought it was a beautiful option. But the moment you allowed another woman to entertain you, the moment you chose to indulge that knowingly, everything shifted. You resent my sharpness. I'm grateful for it. It's the only reason I saw through you before you stripped me of everything. Your love is just like your conscience, coated in sugar and worth very little. It was never enough for me. The veins in his arms stood out. His fists clenched, released, clenched again. And then, as if something inside him finally collapsed, he turned away. "Get some rest," he muttered. And left in a hurry. Chapter 12. After the Novatech acquisition agreement was signed, the funds never moved. When Eric pressured finance to release the payment, my legal team stepped in. They formally notified him that the acquisition documents were under investigation for suspected fabrication and procedural violations. Judicial proceedings had been initiated. As the primary signatory, Eric was temporarily barred from participating in any company operations and was required to cooperate fully with the investigation. He refused to believe it. He lashed out at the attorneys, shouting, even attempting to get physical. The police were called for obstruction of justice. He was detained. He requested to see me. I didn't go. Everything was handled through my legal representative. I've never denied that Eric is brilliant when it comes to technology. The company would not be where it is without his contributions. But understanding code is not the same as understanding control. While he was immersed in the fantasy of using an acquisition to redirect assets, I had already moved. As the legal majority shareholder, I revoked his signing authority, updated the bank signatories, and locked down access to all corporate accounts. Even with the power of attorney I had once signed for him, the acquisition agreement held no legal standing. It was invalid. At the same time, I filed suit against him for attempted misappropriation of company assets. The very agreement he had signed became evidence against him. During his detention, he reached out repeatedly through his lawyer. I offered him what he once believed were choices. Option 1, sign the divorce agreement. The company would remain mine. As for marital assets, I would grant him a minimal settlement, more out of conscience than obligation. Option 2, let the court decide. Given the scale of the amount involved, 5 to 10 years was not an exaggeration. And by the time he emerged, the world outside would not wait for him. I waited 2 weeks. He chose option 1. I received the signed divorce agreement. And full ownership of the company. The industry began to whisper. Cold-blooded. A black widow. Megan, worried I might be shaken, tried awkwardly to comfort me. I patted her shoulder. If they're calling me ruthless, I said calmly, that means I won. Outside noise has never mattered. What matters is what you hold firmly, legally, undeniably, in your own hands. Epilogue. Eric took most of the core engineers from the product division and started a new company. He had always believed it was his technology that carried the company to where it stood. That my so-called management strategy was secondary, replaceable. I almost laughed. Anyone disloyal enough to leave so easily was a liability anyway. He saved me severance costs. So I rebuilt. I offered double, sometimes triple, the previous salaries to recruit a new technical team. For critical roles, I didn't just offer pay. I offered profit sharing. Equity. I even helped secure jobs for spouses and school placements for their children. Within 6 months, the new team integrated seamlessly into ongoing projects. Young minds move fast. They built products tightly aligned with real market demand. Performance climbed higher than it ever had before. As for Eric, from what mutual contacts told me, chaos followed him. No proper HR structure. No solid business development pipeline. No financial oversight. Of course not. He never understood those systems. They landed projects, yes. But cash flow was unstable. He cut salaries to ease the pressure. People left. Projects stalled. Word spread. Several industry partners quietly blacklisted him. When he ran out of options, he came to see me. I watched him apologize. Confess. Cry. And felt nothing. Everyone pays for their ignorance. My price was paid on a cold operating table. His is still accruing. Epilogue 2. One afternoon during coffee break, Megan leaned toward me and lowered her voice. Boss, do you remember Chloe? I arched a brow for her to continue. I've been keeping an eye on her. Just in case she tried to retaliate against the company. She ended up getting involved with one of our former clients. Probably met him back when she was hanging around the clubhouse. Judging from her social media, she lived pretty well for a while. But recently the guy's wife found out. Apparently, the wife went after her publicly and made sure everyone knew the truth. Megan's face was lit with gossip-fueled excitement as she scrolled through her phone. She's trending online now. People dug up all kinds of stuff about her. She's young. She had options. Why choose a path like that? I took a slow sip of my coffee. I wasn't surprised. I had simply connected the wife with the right information. What she chose to do with it was her decision. Sometimes, people create their own consequences. At this point, my love life is a public service announcement. Free of charge.